Here we go, Mike. Here we go, Mike and Tom show. We're here today. Yeah, we're doing our episode today. This is going to be a little confusing episode, so that's why we're coming on before we show
This
it.
isn't the first time we've done this.
No, that's what that is. But we want to thank our Covenant Coffee sponsor, Randy Martin. Randy, thank you for going out there and looking after the emancipated foster group, where they actually come out of the program and there's no more money attached to them. So there's not a lot of people that are like saying, hey, I want to
caring about them.
Yeah.
Something.
But what Randy does is he teaches them how to roast beans, how to work in the environment of retail, and he teaches them how to do all aspects, including maintenance and janitorial. So Randy, you're teaching these young kids life skills. So there again, if you're looking for Covenant Coffee, a great coffee, order it online.
CovenantCoffee.org.
Yeah, and it's Covenant Ministry is really what it's supporting.
It is. Yep.
And if you're local, go out to North Chester to Randy's location and meet some of the folks. So Mike and I, we actually were blessed to film a show, and this show has one of the candidates for SB 20 in California, which turns out to be quite a big political race because it's the congressional seat that Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy left empty. And, there's a lot of been talk about that. Kevin's a good man. Kevin's out, and we wish Kevin well. His mother died and passed away just a few weeks after he stepped down. So wish him our best wishes there. But the race now is between two horses. I can say
pretty
that
much
week before the Kentucky Derby,
right?
Right? Yeah. So it's a race between two guys, and we both know them. We extended both invitations to Vince Vaughn, and he's a assemblyman right now. And
California Assemblyman,
and Mike Boudreau, who's a Tulare County Sheriff, and he's also president of the California Sheriff's Association. And Mike Boudreau came right in. He came in hot too.
He did.
He
I love Mike.
Mike's an awesome guy.
You saw him at church the other day.
No,
Canyon Hills.
I love that.
Yeah,
Mike's. That's what I like about Mike. Our show 511 Ministry Media is about what people are doing and continue to do. And Mike's doing a great job in Tulare County. Been there, I think, for a decade or over a decade.
Quite a long time. Yeah, at least a decade.
And
he'll say it in the show.
Yeah, he does. And so if you're out there and you're looking for a candidate to support because they've had a general election for the next CB20 seat for 24.
To make up the remaining time.
For 25 on. But then they've also had to fill the seat that Kevin left between May 21st and December. So it's kind of confusing out there, but they're both running, and what they've ended up doing, because there was a big field in this, and they went through the general, and neither one got 50%. So now they go to the November for the seat in 25 on, and then they had a special election for the seat currently. I know it's getting confusing. The seat currently between May 21st and December 20th, because Kevin's no longer doing it. Somebody's got to finish out his term. And they had another runoff. One got 50%. But on this one, they had a very interesting thing happen. And I think I've told Mike about it, and I told our other listeners, is that Vince Vaughn got 40.5%. And Mike Boudreau popped up a little bit on 26%. So I do believe that our sheriff, Donnie Youngblood, and our Senate woman, Shannon Grove, came out and both supported Mike Boudreau. And then on the other side, Kevin McCarthy and Donald Trump have came out to support Vince Vaughn.
Well, naturally, Kevin would support Vince.
Yeah, and so we've got kind of a split here in Kern County. It's a conservative hub. They also call us the armpit of California. But why?
And everybody's coming to the armpit, I guess.
If you want to watch our Relevant Rant show that Mike and I did on Friday, we talked a lot about that because it is San Francisco. It came out in the San Francisco media that people from Orange County, Los Angeles, and San Francisco are moving to the armpit of California. Why would they call it the armpit of California and move here? It doesn't give me any good impression, but they're moving here because they got a great economy. It's a great hometown feel, and you still have a very affordable housing market, right?
Yeah. Every time you say hometown like that, it makes me think of hometown sports.
It does. That's another topic. That's another show.
That's for tomorrow.
Yeah. So there again, watch 511 Media. Mike, you want to throw in your hat in the ring on this one? Because there again, Vince, if you're out there listening, and I've been told that you hopefully catch this, we want you in. I've talked to Vince's people.
Yeah.
I ended up talking to Vince's people. My daughter did
people.
My daughter did an internship for Kevin McCarthy and Vince Vaughn. And I love Vince. We've seen him at an event this year that I did
We talked to Mike directly.
Yes, we did. And we talked to Vince too. But Vince seemed like he wanted to be on our show. If he still does, if we've done something to offend him. Did you do something to offend Vince?
I don't was
right in front
Not
of
that I'm
us.
aware of.
He was right in front of us at the Law Enforcement Man of the Year Awards.
Sometimes I do stuff and I don't realize it. So
I'm trying to think about that now. It's getting in my head. Like, what do we do to offend you, Vince? But he hasn't given me. His people haven't got back to me yet. So
people haven't got back to your people.
Yeah, my people is just me. I don't have people.
You got people.
So we're going to go ahead and play this show that Mike and I did. We'll be back afterwards to throw in our comment. But sit back and enjoy, because this guy could be representing the United States in the current sitting Congress, and the one going forward. So Mike Boudreau, Sheriff of Tulare County.
Created the 10 Amendments. The First Amendment was freedom of religion. Nowhere does it say that church has to be separated from the state. What it says is the state is not allowed to get involved in the church. Yes. And I preach that everywhere I go.
I love that.
Because churches must get involved in what's happening in our country.
Wow, we're going to never believe this. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google. Go out there and listen to us. So we're excited about it. We're glad you're excited about it too.
Hey everyone, welcome to Lunch Break.
Hey.
And we're glad to be here with Mike Boudreau, Tulare County Sheriff, my good friend Tom Touchstone. And we're just going to kind of launch into it, talk to Mike about his life, how we got here, and all of those things. So
we'll probably jump into some other shows, because Mike's going to be on 4 of our shows. We're going to package them up for you guys. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. If it wasn't for you guys, I think we'd still do it, wouldn't we?
I don't know. We have fun, right? It might be a little harder to pay the bills, but
we'd still do it. So glad you joined in. But let's jump right into this. I think the things I'd like to know is, you've got a name that doesn't sound like it's spelled.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So are you constantly being asked that, how do you spell that, or they just assume they know how to spell
Depends on where you're from, right? So in my county, in Tulare, Kings, Fresno, people got it pretty well solid.
Okay.
You float outside the Central Valley, because I haven't heard it before, and I typically lead in with, because they'll call me Boudrex, Bordeaux, and what I usually tell people is, picture Casper in a rowboat. So Casper the ghost is saying boo, and then he's rowing the boat. Boudreaux. Right? Somehow it resonates in people's minds.
You've had to do that.
I've had to do that many times.
My name Touchstone wasn't very, people touch down, touch tone, and then the Disney brought out Touchstone Pictures, and it got a little easier.
Well, and they often say, Boudreaux's so unique, but it's not in the South. If you go back to Louisiana, Boudreaux's as common as Garcia and Gonzalez and Rodriguez in California.
Is it French or Cajun?
It's Cajun.
Yeah.
Boudreaux's very, very Cajun.
Yeah.
I get asked that a lot. Are you French? Well, there's French descent. Well, yeah. Yeah, my brother makes boudin and jambalaya pretty regularly.
Oh boy, I love it. But you're a Californian.
I'm born and raised California.
Born and raised in the Central Valley.
Yep, sure was. I was born in Porterville, California, which is north of here in Tulare County. I was raised in Tulare County.
Okay.
We have family all over the Central Valley. So my brother-in-law and sister-in-law both live here. He's a fireman at Bakersfield City Fire.
Ooh, I love the city.
Yeah, and then my uncle, he is a drywall contractor here in Bakersfield. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law both live in Tehachapi. That's where my wife was raised, and she went to Bakersfield College. So we're down here.
You are. You have to be.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And so you are the sheriff for Tulare County.
Yeah.
And it covers the Kings and the Tulare. And
well, Tulare County is separate from Kings. Back in the day, way back in the day,
wow, I didn't know that.
Tulare County went all the way over to Monterey and encompassed Fresno County. It used to be called the Tulare Lakes. And the Yoquet Indians in the area of Tulare, it's the Tule Lakes. And that's where Tulare came from. And over the course of time, different counties were separated, and Kings County was part of that cut. But Tulare County covers about 4,500 square miles. Our agency has about 1,000 people
Really?
that work for us. Yeah, our population is depending on the census. So the census shows us about 480 and change, but the reality of it is we're probably in the closer marker of 600,000 with people that are here now. But it's a big county. We have faced all the issues that any other county faces.
Yeah. And being in California, that gives you some more hoops to jump through or over one or the other. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Well, I think isn't Tulare? See, I grew up in a farming family too,
Sure.
so we were actually in Tulare County, right on the county line, right in Delano.
Okay.
But I think Tulare County has got more farming, at least now, than Bakersfield or Kern County does, don't they?
Well, Tulare County, Fresno County, Kern County, they're always battling for the top county of agricultural production. This last year we edged out and we're the number one. Fresno 2, I think Kern was maybe 3.
I think we're putting pavement over a lot of
Yeah, we're farming asphalt.
We'll probably get into that later, but quite frankly, Kern County should be one of the most prosperous, richest counties in the state with its oil, but there's overregulation. There's a lot
Well, we
going
can't
on.
drill, right?
Can't drill, you can't frack. There's a lot of things. We'll get into that later.
I used to be in the farming business. I worked for a company called Sunworld. I was a vice president there, and before I went into the ministry. But agriculture, San Joaquin Valley fed 1/7 of the world.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's even on the map anymore because of all the strangulations.
Well, I mean, the agriculture, it is on the map. I mean, we're producing billions of dollars worth of we're producing the world's food. We're producing the nation's food. And I quite frankly think it's a matter of national security. And people ask that question, and I say, well, who's going to feed our troops? We need to feed our troops.
Well, and that's why I call it
actual real food, not printed food.
Real food.
I always call it strangulation instead of regulation because
truly
that's, we used to farm in Irvine.
Yeah.
Until they became, and a lot of people don't know the story about Irvine, but it used to be Orange County. And now I don't even think, they used to have 100 acres of commemorative oranges.
Right.
I think they've pulled those out.
I think they're all gone.
I think they are. And so when people think about Orange County, they have no idea what the name is, but it was such a huge farming area. The Irvine family was down there. Now we have Irvine, and our company, Sunworld, we took over their farming operations. But when the pesticide or the strangulation side started getting to the point where you couldn't afford to produce a crop.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, right? All the small family farmers, like my family, are driven out of business.
Oh, multi-generation deep farmers, ranchers, dairy.
Large.
I talked to
families.
families that I know. They're 8 generations deep of dairy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge issue when it comes to our water and what's happening with our water. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But farmers, ranchers, dairymen, they're overregulated. I quite frankly don't think, this is what I say, and I say it on the campaign trail, I don't think farmers or ranchers should be charged one dime for water. And the reason for that is it's national security issue.
Right.
They shouldn't be charged one dime for water.
I have a lot of friends that are farmers, and now that I'm in the ministry, they'll call me and say, how hard it is to keep from throwing a pump hose into the aqueduct.
Right.
and I'm like, just don't do it.
Just don't want the sheriff involved in that kind of thing.
Just don't do it
Yeah.
because if we're paying 100%, we get allocated a few percent,
Right.
but we get charged 100%. And it's like, well, it's California.
Well, I grew up in the ag world. I mean, I was born in Tulare County, and I've been raised in Tulare County. All my friends, we would drag irrigation line in the orange groves, and we would
That's what we
stack
did.
hay, bales of hay
That's
when
what
we
we
were
did.
feeding on dairy. And I had friends all through ag, all through high school and all through elementary school, and we had horses and cattle. And I understand ag. I understand the families and the impacts that comes with that. And all the way up until I was 19 years old. I mean, 19 years old, I got hired with the sheriff's office, and that's where I've been ever since.
Well, that's awesome.
So what was it like? Because my brother was a 29-year deputy sheriff in Kern County.
Yeah.
I don't know why he tried to make 30. After what they say? After 5 years, state owns your heart.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Well, what it comes down to is age and time and service. At some point, the retirement system, you're paying money to be there.
Yeah.
And so he probably had a point where he goes, look, I'm not paying anyone to be
Well,
here.
he ended up having a heart attack.
Oh, okay.
And
So he had a medical.
He went that route.
Okay,
And so then he ended up having a stroke, and and he was still trying to go back because he loved the
He
profession.
loved the job.
He loved helping people. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't get. And I tell people all the time, since I've been working with the city fire department as a chaplain for 3 decades, when you dial 911, you want somebody on your worst day to come out, and they're having hopefully a good day.
It's funny you say that. I during the BLM movements, I put out on Twitter, I said, hey, look, for all of you out there hating law enforcement right now, just leave us your name and your number. And when you dial 911, just let us know you don't want us to come.
Yeah.
Now, it sounded cute at the time. I got pretty beat up for it.
I don't doubt
But
that.
the reality of it is, to your point, when you dial 911, you don't want excuses.
No.
You want someone to come and help.
Right.
And you want it to be PDQ.
No, you want it right now.
Yeah,
That's
because there's something going on in your life that's making you rethink all of the things that have been previously said or done, or maybe you've agreed with, maybe you haven't agreed with. I don't know. If you listen to our show enough, you know how we feel. But you're still listening, you know how we feel. So I love it. So as a young man, I didn't know my brother wanted a career in law enforcement. I was living in LA for a decade, and my mom called me and goes, "Hey, you gonna come home for your brother's graduation?" I go, "College or what?" And he's like, "No, he's been in the sheriff's academy or the academy." And I did, and I was, my brother did. I was very proud of him, and the job that he did, and the way he moved into his profession as far as a man. I always admired that. My brother and I were never in the military. Neither was my dad, but he taught us to respect the officials, the ones that are willing to put their lives on the line for us on a daily basis.
Well, how I got there is I had a heavy influence from my father. My dad was with the sheriff's office for 30 years. So my brother and I both, neither one of us wanted to do anything but law enforcement. My brother did a full, career as a California Highway Patrolman, retired as a sergeant, and he just recently retired. And then I wanted to do nothing but wear the Tulare County Sheriff uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were heavily influenced by my dad. We were in a small rural community, mountain community, about 400 year-round residents. I hunted, I fished, all these areas within this district that I'm running for. I've hiked them, I've been in them. But,
And if you don't live in Kern County,
yeah,
you got to be in great shape. That's why you still do the elliptical.
I still do it. Yeah. But, we for my dad, he was a deputy sheriff in the area, and we went to church 4 days a week.
I love that.
Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, no excuses. And you had to go. Now, I remember as I got older, I would beg every other Sunday to stay home at 7 o'clock. You know why? Because that's when Chips came on. So for any of the young people
Yeah, I
watching, they
remember
may
that.
not know, but I wanted to stay home and watch Chips. I wanted to be a cop. And that's what influenced my brother to go to highway patrol.
So there again, we have a lot of friends that are high patrol. I never asked this question, especially on air. So was it true? Because I remember that Poncherello and the guys weren't allowed to.
Trying
they
to
didn't
think of the
have
name.
guns.
Hey, what?
They didn't have guns. Was that something that they worked out with the CHP? That hey,
What, on the movie set?
yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, as they would ride around, I was like going, they don't have guns. You never saw a gunfight. You never saw anything. And I'm not saying I wanted to. I'm just saying
Yeah.
the reality of things. I thought, well, that's.
Well, I think it was a different time too. I mean, when you had a show like that,
Yeah.
getting an officer involved in a shooting, it was more about the officers helping the community.
Yes.
And that's what the TV show really
And
reflected.
it was.
Yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah. I love Chips.
Yeah,
I think-
I watched it too.
I think it's.
I loved
think,
it.
Yeah.
I think it was an iconic show.
It was.
It really was iconic. I've met Eric Estrada a couple times. My
Oh,
dad
wow.
has as well. Great guy. It's fun. But that was my influence growing up. My dad going to church and him being a deputy sheriff. And he had a lot of strict rules on us. And but God was the number one source for us. And so that's what influenced me. I wanted to get into law enforcement and be like my dad because he was kind to everybody. He served the community. And I wanted to do the same. I remember 7, 8, 9 years old. I don't know how many church tables I've unfolded and chairs that I've unfolded. I don't know how many beans I've served, but I've done it since I was 10.
If you're in a ministry family,
Yeah.
you're involved.
You're involved.
Especially if when somebody says they go to church 4 times. See, I grew up a heathen. Our audience knows that, but God didn't leave it that way.
Sure.
So I used to wonder why nothing was open on Sundays. I did, and I was like, and my mom explained it. Well, there are some people who go to church. I'm like, what's that? I mean, that was our.
What's that?
Yeah, I was like, what? And why do they do that?
Yeah.
You know, I got to. No good shows came on, in my opinion, until noon. It was just like, and so no cartoons. There's these people on TV preaching, and and I was like, and that's all it was on. We had 3 channels or 4, and that was it. So I'm not downgrading it now because I'm in ministry. I love Jesus, I love God, but that was how our mind thought.
Well, I remember. I mean, my mom would turn on Jimmy Swaggart or Osteen or any one of those modern day evangelists or ministers. And my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother was in a church that quite frankly was the old wooden pew stomping,
Oh, that's cool.
tongue talking, Pentecostal church. Then my mom was the song leader in the church, and my dad was a deacon. I didn't have no choice.
You did not.
We went to church.
You did.
That was in Porterville.
My grandmother was in McFarland.
Okay.
And so my mom was raised in McFarland, and I remember being in McFarland, running the dirt alleyways out there with my brother. But on Sunday and Sunday night, if we were in McFarland, we were at the McFarland Pentecostal Church.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how, Mike? How's that influenced you as a law enforcement officer? As a 19, and what has that done? There again, everyone hopefully tunes into our show knows that we're a biblically based show. I mean, we talk about a lot of topics because I do believe conversation has happened. And but First Thessalonians is the good work that people are doing, and that's what the show's always been about.
Yeah, that's what the whole business is about.
Yeah. So how did it influence you as that young officer and moving through?
Well, we all go through ups and downs. I'm not going to say that I followed the Lord my entire life. I didn't. I've had times where I found myself not, but other times where, the Bible talks about you raise your children in the ways of the Lord and they return.
It is true, though, isn't it?
It is true.
I mean, that is something that if you're out
It
there,
is true.
trust in the promise.
It is true. And I found myself kind of back and forth. But anytime I put the uniform on, I think I just saw it in a way like through the lenses of my dad. He was always helping people. I wanted to help. I hated when people were victims. I wanted to help the victim, either counseling or arresting the person who committed that crime. I've always lived it. And it went beyond that many times. In the sheriff's office, for those who work in sheriff's offices, many times we work the jails. And I come across a lot of people where I found myself, counseling or ministering to and bringing them to the Lord. And there's other times that, it became a little bit more challenging when I would see the victims of egregious crimes. And you think, how can God allow these types of things to happen? And so there's ups and downs. But I think that life experience helps you to get to the balance, right? And so I've seen some egregious things, but those egregious, horrible things have allowed me to see tenderness and kindness and in others in a different regard. So even though you see the ugliness, you realize that the ugliness is not what all the world is.
Because you guys see everything.
Everything.
You see life and you see death.
Yeah.
As we had Anthony Galageza, the last, not the current, but the last chief of the fire department on, he had a story on one of those moments, and we do work with first responder trauma. We talked to Mike about that, which I'm so excited to work with you. But do you have any of those moments in your life that really stuck with you?
Oh yeah.
It's some of those things you have to tell people. There's a smell, there's a thought, and I think that and I do believe this, that as you guys are in that profession to put your life on the line, or at least go into where there are really, like I love your word, egregious circumstances, that they affect us. And I know we're going to get into that on another show because, Mike, we're going to do 4 of our shows with Sheriff Bedreau. But can you share that?
I mean, I have some stories that really kind of sit in me. Some of those I don't share. They're pretty bad. But as deputy sheriffs, we're also deputy coroners, and so we deal with death on a regular basis. And so I'm also the sheriff coroner elected in my county, and so we see a lot of death. And so I remember certain times where, for example, there was a young mother that had gotten in a car crash and she was killed. And I just remember seeing this young mom, seeing the pictures in her purse. I knew the father and the child were home. I actually ended up knowing this young lady. And so that sticks with me because I knew that I had to go and notify the father and this young girl that their mom had been killed in a car accident. Those types of things really required you to have a tenderness. It really requires you to have a compassionate heart. And God brings the comfort if you allow it to. I remember before going in and telling the father, just praying that this situation, that God brings some sense of peace to it. There's stories like that all through my career. I've been in multiple shootings. I've been in 5 shootings, and in situations where I really resonate with the men and women in uniform.
Mhm.
I have real life in the trench experiences as the sheriff. I'm not a sheriff who is an outsider coming in.
You're right. You're
I
rank and
came
file.
since I was 19 years old, rank and file, all the way up. And when I was elected 11 years ago into the position of sheriff, there's not one position of rank that I haven't held in the sheriff's office, nor any situation or emotional trauma that any of the young men and women are going through that I
Practical
haven't
training.
experienced.
Practical training.
And so I think that's what really separates me from a lot of
it is.
different people. And so when I see someone, for example, go through divorce because they focus their entire career on that and not family,
Mhm.
I can minister to them, or I know what they're going through. And coming up 37 years now, I've been in 37, coming up on 38 years of law enforcement service. And
So you've actually outlived the life expectancy in your position.
I have.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you talk to a lot of people who don't understand what you guys do, because my experience also goes back to an accident, and it's where I had to use the services that we provide through Shielding the Front Line, and I remember that, I love this book called The Body Keeps Score. That everything that we involve ourselves in, trauma or happiness, success, it's a balance. And as you do that, what is your key to be able to walk through that? Because that wasn't your first call of the day.
No.
Sometimes they're a late call or a call out. But what allows you to walk through your morning coffee and then you get to a moment like that where you almost got to change hats?
Well, you change hats all the time. There's a lot that comes into your training. There's a mental mindset, I think, that needs to be trained and prepare people, young officers coming in to prepare. You have to not just prepare to know how to shoot your gun or get into a car chase. But I think we need to start training the men and women on how to cope with trauma.
Yeah, they have
And
to.
that's a training experience.
it is.
One of them that steps out, and you may have seen it on national news, we had what we called, there was 6 people that were killed in their home recently. It hit the national news. A young 16-year-old girl and her 6-month-old infant baby were shot and killed, along with the entire family. And so I'm standing over this young lady, and quite frankly, they said she was 16. She looked 11. She was a tiny little thing, and she was holding her infant child. And so I looked, as I'm standing there as the leader of the agency. I have to be strong. This is a terrible situation. I've lived it, been through it. I've learned how to cope with it. But then I see my young officers around, right, and our investigators around. They were professionals, and they clicked in, and they did what they were having to do. But I'll tell you, when it was all over, we made sure that we got them services right away. To see that kind of thing, the average citizen, the average person doesn't understand when you're standing over the top of someone's life who's gone. And then spiritually, you know that it's just the physical being there. And so there's a lot of questions in your mind that take place with that. But to answer your question, I think that coming up with my father, coming up into the church, coming up in the environment that I did, understanding trauma and how to deal with trauma, helped me to cope with that. And personally, I have this turn-off mechanism. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm able to see things, turn it off, move forward, and put it down aside. But how do young officers do that now? We really need to, and we've started that, and I think you have too, in talking to you with a lot of this.
Shielding the Front Line.
Yeah, okay, and so we're beginning to recognize that the human brain doesn't really process well unless you train it to process well.
Yeah, and I believe this, that as you're there, I think your spiritual intuity and your spiritual connection is allowing you to look around the room and see that. We had Cindy Zimmer on our show. One thing I asked her was how her spiritual life affected her job. She talked about the Bible on her desk, but she talked about being led by the Holy Spirit. Sure. She said there was a day that there was a tragedy in town where 2 minors were run over, and she went to the crime scene and ended up next to the mother. And she felt God's pull her there. But when she was there, she was able to comfort. But then when the mother said, "And who are you?" She was able to say, "I'm the person that's going to make sure that we get to the bottom or the top."
Oh, she was led by discernment.
Yes.
I think if you recognize discernment, and I think that's the still small voice that we talk about, that we're supposed to listen to, and as well as having ears to hear.
Yeah.
Ears to hear is not audibly. I believe that ear to hear is your spiritual discernment.
Yeah.
And so when you know, there's a knowing. I call it a knowing that you're supposed to go talk to somebody or stand by
Yeah.
somebody or be somewhere. That's that still small voice that God's giving you direction to do. Sounds like she listened to it that day. I've done it many times.
That's I'm hearing that in
Yeah.
your voice.
Yeah.
Where you're saying, "Hey, I'm the sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
and today I'm going to get out from this desk or out from this car, and I'm going to go out and let the Holy Spirit lead me in my job." And I think that's something. If you're out there, one of the things that you have to realize, no matter what profession you're in, it's okay, because sometimes those are where God meets you with compassion. For
Well, and
others.
he's waiting for you to step out and be obedient. And if it's not going to be you, he's going to pick someone else.
You know, Mike, isn't it so true that
Right.
when we as believers, and if you're out there and you're not, then I would suggest that you kind of maybe start to investigate faith. You find that your responsibility, the Bible says that we work for God, not for men. And we're supposed to do it wholeheartedly. And when you're sitting there putting that uniform on, realizing that I'm a representative today, not only for our society or Tulare County, but also for the Lord, and the impact that you can have being that person in front of people who are needing, they need both that day. And I think it's terrible when we tell people to separate the two. I don't know how to do that.
In society today, and it's a big contention issue for me because how the Constitution was set up, our First Amendment right, people will preach about keeping church and state separated. Here's the reality. When we were going through the Revolutionary War against the Britons forced a certain religion on people. And so when we created the 10 Amendments, the First Amendment was freedom of religion. Nowhere does it say that church has to be separated from the state. What it says is the state is not allowed to get involved in the church. And I preach that everywhere I go
I love that.
because churches must get involved in what's happening in our country. And you should be able to talk about it right up at the pulpit.
They had after our own heart,
Right.
right?
Well, it's true,
Yeah.
and what's happened is the narrative of society with our media is telling the church to shut up. I've had it with that.
You preach it. I'm going to back away.
Well, when you take a look at it, the 13 colonies, when they came and formed the Constitution, they said, well, they didn't all agree. And so we're going to agree on some conditions that we can make amendments. One of the first things they did was say that we get to practice our free religion. And when George Washington first was president, he took the House of Representatives next door to a small church from the Capitol as he came into office. You aware of this story?
The story. I'm aware of this. The circumstance. Not the
So he goes next door to a small church and he prays over this country. Right? He prays over this country. He prays over the House. He prays
what
over
a
the Capitol.
refreshing idea.
Right? And so did you know that church is still standing today? And do you know where that was? It was in New York because the Capitol was in New York. And where the Capitol was is where the Twin Towers were that come crumbling down. And the church next door, look it up, you can Google it, only had a few cracked windows. That's all that happened to that church.
Don't you love those stories?
Yeah.
I love those stories because here's the deal. God has not forgotten those prayers.
He has not.
What's the name
He's
of the
not
church,
forgotten those prayers. Yeah, you would ask me the name of the church.
The thing is, I've
Right?
been there, so I might have been to
It's
church.
right. It's right next door. I'm trying to remember. You're gonna make me look it up.
No, well, it's okay.
But it's right next door, and it's got trees that are around it.
Okay.
And I've been to the
I've
church.
probably been to the church.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. and so that story resonates with me because I'll tell you another story. When I first became sheriff, I was in uniform and I prayed at an event in uniform.
That probably brought out some detractors.
It brought people out.
Larry.
Right, pushing back, saying you have to keep church separated from state. And I gave that speech.
Good for you.
And I talked about George Washington. I talked about our country. I talked about our First Amendment. I talked about that the church is not to be separated from the state.
Mike,
And I'll tell you, I haven't had any pushback since. I pray in uniform every chance I get.
I love
That's
that, Mike,
awesome.
because you know what? This is what the world. So I'll just go to the world. The world has told us, church, stay in your little corner.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come out, and we're going to let you have some freedom and some rights. And people bought into that. Honestly, it's like mind blowing. I'm more lucky to be in a church where we don't buy into that.
Yeah.
And as we tried to do what people said, and we bought into a narrative. We tried to have church outside. And Pastor Ross says, I think we're going back inside.
Yeah.
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 And we did, because it was like, this is nonsense.
The First Amendment, right to religion, right? Freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. You can petition the government if you want to, right? When it comes to free speech, free press, you can combine all those to say, you can't shut our church down.
No.
We have the right to free speech. We have the right to assemble. We have the right to petition the government. We have the right to our freedom of religion. The whole shutdown during COVID was a complete violation of the First Amendment.
Well, and I think it's important that the way they founded this too, because it's not just, hey, we give you permission to do this. The Constitution talks about these are inalienable rights granted by God.
That's right.
So
What's that word mean, Mike?
that we can't be separated from
There you
them.
go. I'm
right?
glad you understood that.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And so I believe, as we talked earlier, that more and more believers, more and more church should be standing up and pushing back. And so I get told this, well, Sheriff, we have to turn the other cheek. And what I say to that is twofold. One is the Bible does talk about turning the other cheek, but it's talking about being offended by words that are spoken. Being offended by words that are spoken, turn the other cheek. And nowhere does it say that someone gets to punch you in the mouth and you have to turn and look the other way. Look at what David did. When David faced Goliath, he didn't get on his knees and pray.
No.
He picked up 5 stones and said, I'm ready to fight.
Yeah.
And it's time for the church to pick up their 5
Well,
stones.
it's so funny. I'll tell people when I get into a confrontation, and Mike and Pastor Ron know I do that a lot. Even as a believer, it's a problem that I have. You guys know about that.
It's okay.
And I tell them, I go, I'll turn once, but you better duck.
Yeah.
After that, because hey, if I'm biblical, but after that, grab the horns. You're gonna
How
get the
many
bull.
times over history, right, have believers, the Israelites, had to fight?
Yes, they did.
They had to fight. And so we cannot allow now, am I saying that we go to the streets and we fight? And what I'm saying is that there's ways to take
Yes.
back what's happening.
There is.
And so my upbringing, all the way, because we started with that,
Yeah.
since I was a small child, that we were raised in the church. This is the way it is. And what we learned is that you must stand for what you believe in.
Yes.
And so when you talk about the course of my life, there's so many stories that I can tell you. I walked in on a guy, I had the discernment. I walked in, he was getting ready to hang himself. And he told me, he goes, I was getting ready to hang myself, but you came in. I listened to the Lord. I said, that still small voice that I had to listen to. There's story after story where there was a young man in the back of my car. And I started talking to him about the Lord. He said, you know what? I was going to overdose. I was going to kill myself tonight. But you started talking to me and I have hope. There's story after story after story. But had
God
I
did-
not,
and God told you what to do.
he told me when to do
Yes.
it. Or he placed me in a place. He placed me in a place
Opportunity.
where I needed to be obedient.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to our other part of this story.
Well, can I say this in my life, as I accepted Christ, and I drove everybody nuts. My family will tell you that. My neighbors will too. But I found out that this is the good news. And I say, isn't life about obedience or disobedience?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think there's that, I think we have obedience or disobedience. And I said those things, if we don't do one or the other, bring consequences.
Well, and thank goodness for his grace and mercy
Yes.
and his forgiveness, because we're not under the old law, right?
Yes.
I'm not up here telling you I haven't made mistakes. I've done things
Yeah.
that I wish I hadn't have done, and I've asked forgiveness more than once. Had to ask forgiveness just
That's
today.
being human.
But having said that, I mean, thank goodness for his mercy and grace. And I learned that coming up as a kid. And so when I look at others, I learn quickly not to judge. Right. And we want to as human beings to judge. And I find myself doing that often.
I find myself wanting mercy and grace for me and wrath for everybody else.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, mercy and grace for me, and I want vengeance upon everyone
Well,
else.
as you're saying this, Mike, you're getting me all fired up now because
We
this-
got two more. We got
Well,
two more shows.
But this is exactly why
We do what we do.
This is why 511 exists.
It is.
Because I'm tired of sitting in a corner and not doing something because I'm seeing the society, the direction we're headed, and where my kids are growing up in. And thank God he's given me a godly wife
Right.
who can help raise those kids.
No
But the
doubt.
society they're growing up in, especially in the state of California, is a disaster.
Well,
And
the
that's-
state of
I can't stay
California
quiet.
is, you can't stay quiet. I'm sure we'll touch on
We are.
pro-life. I'm a pro-life guy.
I love that.
And people say, well, when does life begin? When God gives that
Yeah.
life.
I agree.
It doesn't begin 6 weeks on a heartbeat. It begins when God touches for life.
Oh.
All of us were God's touch for life.
There we are.
And so I'm pro-life. And I think when you say it's time to stand up and fight, I think as Christians, we need to, on a mass scale, be walking and protesting the streets
That's right.
for pro-life.
Well, you know what's interesting? God created, we procreate.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
He created us
Mhm.
to procreate.
Mhm.
So, hey, we're going to wrap this one up because Mike, I don't know where our little clock is, but we don't have it. But I think we're there.
I think we're there.
But we're getting ready to get into some really interesting topics.
Juicy stuff, yeah.
Yes, because we're coming back with a Ministry Matters. A lot of you guys know that. Mike Badeau, Sheriff Mike Badeau, his life actually has a point where his voice has gotten louder and it's going to get louder. And that's what we want to hear. We're going to bring you to a new show, Mike and Tom's show. We're going to delve in with a few more detailed questions. And we're going to have Dr. Rizzo come in and do Mentality Unleashed as men with the sheriff. So if you're out there, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending your time. Like us, share us, because there's something here to be said for each and every one of you, because you guys can walk in the same shoes that our sheriff here does.
Have a great day. God bless.
I loved Mike Badeau, huh? Hey, glad to have you back. I hope you got the same thing out of this. There again, if you don't know, we're faith-filled as far as our 511 Media Group. You are now knowing that. You heard the sheriff talk about his faith. He's pro-life.
Yeah.
You know, he's pro-free speech.
And he's got some really cool God stories. That we
Oh my
discussed
gosh, he's
behind the
got
scenes.
great
Yeah.
God stories. So, hey, come out next week. We're going to run another one of our episodes. We got 2 more to air that. And we got an election coming up on May 21st
We
to
did.
fill in Kevin McCarthy's seat until December. And I'll say it again, Vince, if you're out there, hey, have your people call our people. That's the way it was supposed to happen. So,
Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day.